My name is Grace Holloway. I'm 27 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I was living in my parents' house for one very specific reason. I was trying to buy my first condo without destroying my future in the process. Before you judge me for being a grown woman still living at home, understand this. I wasn't freeloading, hiding from adulthood, or drifting. I was playing the long game. The housing market where I live is brutal. Rent is a money pit, and I'd rather endure 2 disciplined years under my parents' roof than burn tens of thousands on rent and delay homeownership indefinitely. That was the agreement. Temporary discomfort for long-term stability. At least, that was the plan, before my mother decided obedience mattered more than independence. There are 4 of us in my family. My parents, me, and my younger sister Lauren, who's 24. Lauren and I grew up in the same house with the same parents, but we might as well have been raised in different worlds. I've worked at the same logistics company since I was 22. I started on the warehouse floor and clawed my way up to operations supervisor. I wake up at 5, hit the gym, manage freight schedules and people all day, come home and handle my responsibilities. I pay my own phone bill, car insurance, groceries, gym membership, everything. On top of that, I save aggressively, between $2,000 and $2,500 every month. At the time all this started, I had nearly $38,000 saved. Lauren, on the other hand, works part-time at a boutique game store, 20 hours a week on a good schedule. The rest of her time disappears into her bedroom, gaming, scrolling, watching people online live lives she insists she'll figure out later. About 8 months before everything exploded, my mother sat Lauren down for what she called a grown-up talk. Lauren needed to contribute more to the household. Fair enough, she was an adult after all. Lauren's solution was dramatic. She started handing over her entire paycheck to our mother every 2 weeks. $400 to $600 depending on hours. Every cent. Mom deposited it into her own account, then gave Lauren back a small allowance for gas and snacks, like she was a teenager again. And my mother loved it. She told everyone how generous Lauren was, how selfless, how she understood family. Never mind that the house was paid off, utilities barely changed, and my mother was effectively controlling her adult daughter's money. In my mother's eyes, Lauren became the golden child overnight. And me, I was invisible. Or worse, selfish. Because I wasn't physically handing over my paycheck, my contributions didn't count. Didn't matter that I paid for everything myself. Didn't matter that I wasn't a burden. Didn't matter that I was building a future. If the money didn't pass through my mother's hands, it apparently didn't exist. 3 months later, the comments started. Little ones at first. Some people understand family values. Lauren helps so much around here. Not everyone thinks about others. Always said within earshot. Always with a look. At dinner, she'd praise Lauren while staring directly at me. On speakerphone with relatives, she'd brag about Lauren's generosity while I sat 2 feet away eating cereal. Then came the direct ask. We were in the kitchen when my mother casually said, "You should start giving me your paycheck too, like your sister." I laughed. I genuinely thought it was a joke. She wasn't smiling. "I'm serious," she said, arms crossed. I explained calmly. The plan, the savings, the agreement we'd made when I moved back after college. I wasn't costing them money. I was preparing to leave responsibly. "That's not contributing to the family," she said. The word family hit the counter like a gavel. And in that moment, I realized something important. This was never about money. It was about control. And my refusal to surrender it had already made me the villain. I just didn't know yet how far my mother was willing to go to punish me for that. When my mother realized I wasn't going to fold, something shifted in her. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first. There was no screaming match, no slammed doors. Just a quiet recalibration, like she was adjusting her strategy. She stopped arguing directly and started performing disappointment instead. At breakfast, she'd sigh while looking at grocery receipts, muttering about prices going up. At dinner, she'd comment on the electric bill, always just loud enough for me to hear. She began leaving envelopes out on the kitchen counter, utilities, insurance notices, tax statements, spread carefully like exhibits in a trial I hadn't agreed to attend. Lauren noticed none of this, or pretended not to. She was too busy enjoying her new status. She started making comments too. Small ones. Smug ones. You know, Mom really appreciates when people help out. Not everyone thinks about the bigger picture. Being part of a family means sacrifice. This was coming from the same sister I'd once watched spend 14 straight hours playing the same game while surviving on energy drinks and frozen pizza. But now she was the responsible one, the example. I ignored it, or tried to. Then my mother escalated. She started engineering discomfort. Groceries I bought for myself mysteriously disappeared, or she'd forget to buy the things only I ate. She ran the dishwasher the second I put a plate in the sink, then complained loudly that I never cleaned up after myself. She scheduled family dinners at times she knew I'd be at the gym, then acted wounded when I wasn't there. And my father? He stayed exactly where he always was, physically present, emotionally absent. Whenever my mother tried to pull him into it, he'd grunt something non-committal and turn back to the television. Neutrality disguised as peacekeeping. The tension peaked the day I came home to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table with a spreadsheet, color-coded, tabs, calculations. She slid it toward me like she was presenting a business proposal. This, she said, tapping the paper, is your fair share. According to her math, I owed $1,800 a month to live in the house I grew up in. The house my parents bought 30 years ago. The house that was fully paid off. I stared at the spreadsheet and laughed. I couldn't help it. The number was so absurd, it short-circuited my brain. This isn't funny, she snapped. This is about respect. Mom, I said carefully, you couldn't rent this room for more than $600, and that's being generous. So you'd rather pay a stranger than support your own family? She shot back. There it was again, the family card. The ultimate guilt weapon. No, I said. I'd rather pay fair market value than be financially exploited. That was the wrong answer. She didn't speak to me for a week after that. But the silence wasn't peace. It was pressure. She turned the heat down in winter, only when I was home. Dinner portions ran out just before I got back from work. One afternoon, I came home to find all my groceries boxed up in the garage. Spring cleaning, she said sweetly. Didn't realize those were yours. They were labeled. None of this was accidental. She wanted me uncomfortable. She wanted me to break, to either hand over my paycheck or leave. And then, one Tuesday morning, as I mobile deposited my paycheck at the kitchen table, $2,847 after deductions, she watched me like a hawk. It would be nice, she said softly, if you helped more. I already do, I replied, not looking up. Lauren gives her whole paycheck. Good for Lauren. She crossed her arms. You're being selfish. That made me look up. I'm selfish, I said slowly. For paying my own bills and saving for my future? You're selfish for not contributing the way this family expects. I stood, grabbed my work bag, and met her eyes. Then maybe I should move out. She didn't stop me. She smiled. And that was when I should have known. This wasn't over. It was about to get much worse. That smile stayed with me all day. It followed me into the warehouse, lingered while I checked inventory reports, hovered in the back of my mind during meetings about shipment delays and staffing gaps. I went through the motions, answered emails, approved schedules, solved problems, while part of my brain kept replaying that moment in the kitchen. My mother hadn't smiled because she was relieved. She'd smiled because she thought she'd won. I came home around 6 that evening, exhausted but steady, already rehearsing what I'd say if she tried to restart the argument. I pulled into the driveway and froze. There was a police cruiser parked in front of the house. For a full 30 seconds, I didn't move. I just sat there with the engine running, staring at the black and white vehicle like it might disappear if I blinked. My first thought was my father, Maybe something had happened, a medical emergency, a break-in. Maybe Lauren had done something reckless. I cycled through every reasonable explanation because the real one didn't even register as a possibility. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the house, heart beating faster with every step. Through the living room window, I could see movement. 2 figures in dark uniforms. My mother on the couch, hunched forward. Lauren in the armchair. My father standing awkwardly near the stairs, looking lost. I opened the door. The room went quiet. One of the officers, a man with gray hair and a calm presence, turned toward me. "Are you Grace Holloway?" "Yes," I said slowly. "What's going on?" "We received a call about a domestic disturbance," he said. "Your mother reported that you'd been acting aggressively and making threats." For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry," I said. "What?" My mother stood up, clutching a tissue. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from effort. "I'm scared," she said, voice trembling. "She's been getting more angry lately. This morning she threatened me." I felt something cold settle in my chest. I looked at my father. "Dad, you were here this morning. Did I threaten anyone?" He shifted uncomfortably. I was watching TV. Of course he was. The younger officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, can you explain what kind of threats were made?" "She said she'd leave," my mother replied quickly. She said it in a very aggressive way. I stared at her. "I said I might move out." "That's threatening," she insisted. I felt unsafe. Lauren finally spoke, her voice hesitant. "Mom, she didn't threaten you." My mother snapped her head toward her. "Stay out of this." But the damage was done. I explained everything to the officers, the paycheck issue, the months of pressure, the argument that morning. I kept my voice level, even, professional. Inside, I was shaking. "So to be clear," the older officer said, "there were no threats of violence." "None," I said. "Ever." My mother tried again. "You don't know what it's like to live in fear." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted gently, "we need specifics." She didn't have any. The officers exchanged a look. Finally, one of them said, "This appears to be a family dispute, not a criminal matter." Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with something darker, because even though they saw through it, my mother had crossed a line, and she couldn't uncross it. They asked if I could stay somewhere else for a few days. I agreed. Not because I was wrong, but because I was done. As the officers stepped outside, the older one tapped the camera on his chest. "Just so you know," he said quietly, "this was all recorded." I nodded. I didn't realize then how important that footage would become, but it was already telling the truth my mother couldn't erase. The police cruiser pulled away, but the house didn't return to normal. It felt hollowed out, like something essential had been ripped from the walls and taken with it. I stood in the driveway for a long moment after the officers left, my work bag still slung over my shoulder, trying to slow my breathing. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the delayed realization of what had almost happened. My own mother had tried to paint me as violent, not metaphorically, not emotionally, legally. I went back inside. My mother was still on the couch, now actually crying instead of performing it. The tissue box sat beside her like a prop she no longer needed. Lauren had disappeared upstairs. My father stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, as if pretending the entire evening had never occurred. "I can't believe you did that," I said quietly. She didn't look at me. "I was scared." "No," I replied. "You were angry, and you wanted to punish me." She shook her head weakly. "You don't understand how threatening you sounded." "There's Bodycam footage," I said, "of everything." That finally made her look up. Her mouth opened, then closed. She said nothing. I went upstairs and packed a bag. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I didn't linger. Every second in that house felt heavier than the last. I called my friend David Miller from the driveway. He didn't hesitate. "Come over. Stay as long as you need." Those 3 days at David's apartment were the calmest I'd felt in months. No tension, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells. Just quiet evenings, takeout, and the strange comfort of being believed without having to prove myself. My phone, on the other hand, was chaos. 6 missed calls from my mother the first day. Voicemails that started apologetic and ended defensive. By the last one, she was telling me I was overreacting and embarrassing the family. Lauren texted twice. "I'm sorry, that was messed up. Mom's been crying all day." I didn't respond. My father left one voicemail, just a sigh followed by, "You should call your mother." On Friday, he called again. "She wants to apologize," he said. "For calling the police?" I replied. "Or for lying to them?" Silence. "Come by tomorrow," he said finally. "We should talk as a family." I agreed, but only if everyone was home. I wanted witnesses. Saturday morning, I walked back into the house I'd grown up in and felt like a guest. My mother looked exhausted. Lauren wouldn't meet my eyes. My father tried to act normal, which only made it worse. "I'm sorry for calling the police," my mother began. "Are you sorry for calling them?" I asked calmly. "Or sorry for lying to them?" Her face tightened. "I didn't lie. I felt threatened." "Mom, stop," I said. "The officers said your claims couldn't be substantiated. Lauren contradicted you. There's video." Lauren finally spoke. "I'm not going to lie for you. She didn't threaten anyone." My mother looked at her like she'd been betrayed all over again. My father tried to smooth it over. "Maybe we should just move past this." "Move past what?" I asked. "The false police report? The fact that there's now a domestic disturbance call with my name attached to it?" No one answered. So I did. "I'm moving out," I said. "I'll be back to pack when you're not here." My mother tried to protest, but I was already done. Because once someone is willing to rewrite reality to control you, staying becomes surrender. And I had already lost enough time. I stayed at David's for another week, and in that space, away from the tension, the constant judgment, the subtle manipulation, I started to realize just how heavy living at home had been. It wasn't just the arguments. It was the feeling that every choice I made had to be justified, that my independence was something to be defended, not celebrated. During that week, my mother went into damage control mode. She called my aunt, then my uncle, then a cousin I barely spoke to. She told them some version of the story where she was the frightened mother and I was the ungrateful daughter who'd lost her temper. She left out the part about the paycheck, the spreadsheet, the months of pressure. Unfortunately for her, my aunt called me. She didn't accuse, she didn't lecture. She just asked, what actually happened? So I told her everything, from the demand for my paycheck to the police standing in my living room. I told her about the Bodycam footage, about Lauren telling the truth, about the officers explaining that my mother's claims couldn't be backed up. There was a long pause. "She called the police on you?" my aunt said finally, "and lied?" "Yes." "That's very serious." A few days later, my mother called me again. This time, her voice was different, less performative, more shaken. "I talked to your aunt," she said. "She made me realize how bad this looks." "How bad it was," I corrected. She admitted, finally, that it hadn't really been about the money. She said she felt like she was losing control as her daughters got older. Lauren giving her the paycheck made her feel needed, important. Me refusing made her feel like I was pulling away from the family. I told her independence wasn't abandonment, that saving for my future was an act of responsibility, not selfishness. She said she understood. I wasn't convinced. A week later, I signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away. It wasn't fancy. The building was old, but it had light, quiet, and most importantly, peace. Moving day came. My parents agreed to be out of the house while I packed. Lauren offered to help. We worked mostly in silence, taping boxes and carrying furniture to David's truck. Halfway through, she spoke. "I get why you're leaving," she said quietly. That surprised me. She admitted Mom had been more controlling than she realized, that handing over her paycheck hadn't felt empowering. It had felt like being a child again. That was the first crack. And cracks, once they form, tend to spread. 2 weeks after I moved into my apartment, Lauren called and asked if we could meet for coffee. That alone was unusual. Growing up, she never asked. She assumed. We met at a small cafe near my place. She arrived early and kept checking the door, like she was worried someone might follow her in. When she finally sat down, she wrapped both hands around her cup and stared into it for a long moment before speaking. "I need to tell you something," she said. I waited. "Mom's been taking most of my paycheck." I didn't react right away. "You've been giving it to her every 2 weeks." "No," Lauren said. "I mean, she keeps almost all of it. She gives me back maybe $50 or $100. The rest stays in her account." That was new. "What does she say she's using it for?" "She says household expenses," Lauren shrugged. "But you were right. They don't really need it. The house is paid off. Dad's pension covers everything." "And when you asked?" She got defensive, said I was being ungrateful. There it was. Control disguised as care. "I don't want to do it anymore," Lauren said. "But after what happened with you and the police, I'm scared. What if she does something like that to me?" I took a breath. "Open your own bank account. Stop giving her access." Lauren winced. "She's going to lose it." "Probably," I said. "But you're 24. You don't need permission to manage your own money." We talked for over an hour. Budgeting, savings, what independence actually looks like. For the first time, she wasn't defensive. She was listening. A week later, she did it. According to Lauren, my mother cried, yelled, and accused her of betrayal. But she didn't call the police this time. The Bodycam incident had rattled her too much. My father called me afterward, said my mother felt abandoned by both daughters. I told him boundaries weren't abandonment. He didn't like that answer. But the truth rarely cares about comfort. I thought the worst of it was behind me. I had my apartment. Lauren had taken back control of her money. The household power dynamic my mother had relied on for years was cracking. I assumed she'd retreat inward, lick her wounds, and quietly resent us from a distance. Instead, she went on the offensive. She started calling relatives again, this time with a new version of the story. According to her, I'd been aggressive for months. According to her, the police had removed me from the house. According to her, she'd been living in fear and doing her best to protect the family. The problem was, this version of events didn't survive contact with anyone who asked questions. My uncle, my father's brother, heard the story and mentioned it casually to my dad. For once, my dad didn't back her narrative. He admitted the police hadn't removed me and that there were some misunderstandings. That was all my uncle needed to hear. He called me directly. I told him everything. Again, calmly, clearly. I mentioned the body cam footage and how the officers themselves said my mother's claims couldn't be substantiated. He went quiet, then asked if the footage was public record. "It should be," I said. "You can request it." He did, and then he watched it. What the video showed was not ambiguous. It showed my mother making claims she couldn't support. It showed me standing still, speaking evenly. It showed Lauren contradicting her. It showed the officers realizing they'd been called into a family power struggle, not a dangerous situation. My uncle didn't confront my mother right away. He sent the video to his wife first, then to my aunt. Then questions started spreading faster than my mother could control. My cousin Amanda called me in tears after watching it. "Your mom seemed unstable," she said carefully. "Are you okay?" Other relatives started reaching out privately. Quiet texts, short calls, support without drama. My mother realized too late that she'd lost control of the narrative. She tried one last move, a group text to over 20 family members. She said she felt attacked, unsafe, that the video was taken out of context and didn't show the full story. My aunt replied before anyone else could. "The video shows pretty clearly what happened," she wrote. "Maybe we should focus on moving forward instead of rewriting events." That ended the conversation. My mother never responded. The family dynamic shifted almost overnight. Some relatives still sided with her. It was easier than admitting she'd crossed a line. But many didn't. They didn't argue. They just quietly stopped engaging with her version of reality. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since this all started. Vindicated. Not loudly, not dramatically, just seen. About a month after I moved out, my mother sent me a text. "We miss having you around. The house feels empty without you." I stared at it for a long time before locking my phone and setting it face down on the counter. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I finally understood what that message really meant. She didn't miss me. She missed control. 2 days later, another text arrived. "Your father's birthday is next week. You should come to dinner." I replied with one sentence. "I'll send him a card." She called immediately. I let it ring. The voicemail she left was familiar. Accusations wrapped in disappointment, guilt disguised as concern. She said I was tearing the family apart, that I was selfish, that she never raised her daughters to turn their backs on family. I deleted it halfway through. A week after that, Lauren called me, excitement barely contained in her voice. She'd gotten a full-time job offer, renewable energy sector, benefits, paid time off, real growth potential. She was moving out next month and wanted advice on apartment hunting. We met for lunch. She actually took notes while I explained deposits, leases, utilities, budgeting. At one point, she laughed and said, "I feel like an adult for the first time." My mother did not take the news well. According to Lauren, there were tears, accusations, claims of abandonment. One final attempt at leverage. She refused to help Lauren move unless she made things right with the family. So Lauren rented a truck. I showed up to help. So did David Miller. So did 2 of Lauren's coworkers. We loaded boxes while my mother watched from the window. She called me while we were hauling the last load. "You're really going to help her do this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I am." "You've turned her against me." "No," I replied calmly. I showed her what boundaries look like. She hung up. Lauren has been in her own place for 2 weeks now. She sent me a picture of her first solo dinner, ramen and grilled chicken. Nothing fancy, but she looked proud. She said it was the first meal she'd cooked without someone criticizing how she did it. As for me, my savings plan is delayed but not destroyed. I pay rent now, $1,350 a month, but I sleep peacefully. I come home to quiet. I make decisions without explaining myself. I no longer feel like my independence is a personal betrayal. My relationship with my mother exists at a distance, polite, surface level. She's never fully apologized for the false police report. She still insists she felt threatened. I no longer argue with that, because facts don't need permission to exist. The Bodycam footage did what I couldn't. It showed the truth without emotion, without escalation, without guilt. It quietly dismantled a lie that had been building for years. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this is simple. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. And leaving a toxic dynamic doesn't mean you've abandoned your family. Sometimes it just means you finally stopped abandoning yourself.